Welcome back to Concepts of Biology. We'll continue to read Chapter 2, Section 2.2, Water. By the end of this section, you will be able to describe the properties of water that are critical to maintaining life. Do you ever wonder why scientists spend time looking for water on other planets? It is because water is essential to life. Even minute traces of it on another planet can indicate that life could or did exist on that planet. Water is one of the more abundant molecules in living cells and the one most critical to life as we know it. Approximately 60 to 70% of our body is made up of water. Without it, life simply would not exist. Water is polar. The hydrogen and oxygen atoms within water molecules form polar covalent bonds. The shared electrons spend more time associated with the oxygen atom than they do with the hydrogen atoms. There is no overall charge to a water molecule, but there is a slightly positive charge on each hydrogen atom and a slightly negative charge on the oxygen atom. Because of these charges, the slightly positive hydrogen atom repels each other and form the unique shape seen in Figure 2.7. Each water molecule attracts other water molecules because of the positive and negative charges in the different parts of the molecule. Water also attracts other polar molecules such as sugar, forming hydrogen bonds. When a substance readily forms hydrogen bonds with water, it can dissolve in water and is referred to as hydrophilic or water-loving. Hydrogen bonds are not readily formed with nonpolar substances like oils and fats, Figure 2.8. These nonpolar compounds are hydrophobic or water-faring and will not dissolve in water. Figure 2.8. As this macroscopic image of oil and water show, oil is a nonpolar compound and hence will not dissolve in water. Oil and water do not mix. Water stabilizes temperature. The hydrogen bonds in water allow it to absorb and release energy more slowly than many other substances. Temperature is a measure of the motion, kinetic energy, of molecules. As the motion increases, energy is higher and thus temperature is higher. Water absorbs a great deal of energy before its temperature rises. Increased energy disrupts the hydrogen bonds between water molecules. Because these bonds can be created and disrupted rapidly, water absorbs an increase in energy and temperature changes only minimally. This means that water moderates temperature changes within organisms and in their environments. As energy input continues, the balance between hydrogen bond formation and destruction swings toward the destruction side. More bonds are broken than are formed. This process results in the release of individual molecules at the surface of the liquid, such as a body of water, the leaves of a plant, or the skin of an organism, in a process called evaporation. Evaporation of sweat, which is 90% water, allows for cooling of an organism because breaking hydrogen bonds requires an input of energy and takes heat away from the body. Conversely, as molecular motion decreases and temperatures drop, less energy is present to break the hydrogen bonds between water molecules. These bonds remain intact and begin to form a rigid lattice-like structure, example ice. When frozen, ice is less dense than liquid water. Molecules are further apart. This means that ice floats on the surface of a body of water. In lakes, ponds, and oceans, ice will form on the surface of the water creating an insulating barrier to protect the animal and plant life beneath from freezing in the water. If this did not happen, plants and animals living in water would freeze in a block of ice and could not move freely, making life in cold temperatures difficult or impossible. Figure 2.9. The lattice structure of ice makes it less dense than the freely flowing molecules of liquid water. Ice's lower density enables it to float on water. Water is an excellent solvent. Because water is polar, with slightly positive and negative charges, ionic compounds and polar molecules can readily dissolve in it. Water is, therefore, what is referred to as a solvent, a substance capable of dissolving another substance. The charged particles will form hydrogen bonds with a surrounding layer of water molecules. This is referred to as a sphere of hydration and serves to keep the particles separated or dispersed in the water. In the case of table salt, sodium chloride, mixed in water, the sodium and chloride ions separate or dissociate in the water, and spheres of hydration are formed around the ions. A positively charged sodium ion is surrounded by the partially negative charges of oxygen atoms in water molecules. A negatively charged chloride ion is surrounded by the partially positive charges of hydrogen atoms in water molecules. These spheres of hydration are also referred to as hydration shells. The polarity of the water molecule makes it an effective solvent and is important in its many roles in living systems. Figure 2.10. When table salt is mixed in water, spheres of hydration form around the ions. Water is cohesive. Have you ever filled up a glass of water to the very top and then slowly added a few more drops? Before it overflows, the water actually forms a dome-like shape above the rim of the glass. This water can stay above the glass because of the property of cohesion. In cohesion, water molecules are attracted to each other because of hydrogen bonding, keeping the molecules together at the liquid air or gas interface, although there is no more room in the glass. Cohesion gives rise to surface tension, the capacity of a substance to withstand rupture when placed under tension or stress. When you drop a small scrap of paper onto a droplet of water, the paper floats on top of the water droplet, although the object is denser or heavier than the water. This occurs because of the surface tension that is created by the water molecules. Cohesion and surface tension keep the water molecules intact and the item floating on the top. It is even possible to float a steel needle on top of a glass of water if you place it gently without breaking the surface tension. Figure 2.11. The weight of a needle on top of water pulls the surface tension downward. At the same time, the surface tension of the water is pulling it up, suspending the needle on the surface of the water and keeping it from sinking. Notice the indentation in the water around the needle. These cohesive forces are also related to the water's property of adhesion, or the attraction between water molecules and other molecules. This is observed when water climbs up a straw placed in a glass of water. You will notice that the water appears to be higher on the sides of the straws than in the middle. This is because the water molecules are attracted to the straw and therefore adhere to it. Cohesive and adhesive forces are important for sustaining life. For example, because of these forces, water can flow up from the roots to the tops of the plants to feed the plant. Buffers, pH, acids, and bases. The pH of a solution is a measure of its acidity or alkalinity. You have probably used litmus paper, paper that has been treated with a natural water-soluble dye, so it can be used as a pH indicator to test how much acid or base, alkalinity, exists in a solution. You might have even used some to make sure the water in an outdoor swimming pool is properly treated. In both cases, this pH test measures the amount of hydrogen ions that exist in a given solution. High concentrations of hydrogen ions yield a low pH, whereas low levels of hydrogen ions result in a high pH. The overall concentration of hydrogen ions is inversely related to its pH and can be measured on the pH scale. Therefore, the more hydrogen ions present, the lower the pH. Conversely, the fewer hydrogen ions, the higher the pH. The pH scale ranges from 0 to 14. A change of 1 unit on the pH scale represents a change in the concentration of hydrogen ions by a factor of 10. A change in 2 units represents a change in the concentration of hydrogen ions by a factor of 100. Thus, small changes in pH represent large changes in the concentrations of hydrogen ions. Pure water is neutral. It is neither acidic nor basic and has a pH of 7.0. Anything below 7.0, ranging from 0.0 to 6.9, is acidic, and anything above 7.0, from 7.1 to 14.0, is alkaline. The blood in your veins is slightly alkaline. pH equals 7.4. The environment in your stomach is highly acidic, pH 1 to 2. Orange juice is mildly acidic, pH approximately 3.5, whereas baking soda is basic, pH 9.0. Figure 2.12. The pH scale measures the amount of hydrogen ions in a substance. Acids are substances that provide hydrogen ions and lower pH, whereas bases provide hydroxide ions and raise pH. The stronger the acid, the more readily it donates hydrogen ions. For example, hydrochloric acid and lemon juice are very acidic and readily give up hydrogen ions when added to water. Conversely, bases are those substances that readily donate hydroxide ions. The hydroxide ions combine with hydrogen ions to produce water, which raises a substance's pH. Sodium hydroxide and many household cleaners are very alkaline and give up hydroxide ions rapidly when placed in water, thereby raising the pH. Most cells in our bodies operate within a very narrow window of the pH scale, typically ranging only from 7.2 to 7.6. If the pH of the body is outside of this range, the respiratory system malfunctions, as do other organs in the body. Cells no longer function properly, and proteins will break down. Deviation outside of the pH range can induce coma or even cause death. So how is it that we can ingest or inhale acidic or basic substances and not die? Buffers are the key. Buffers readily absorb excess hydrogen ions or hydroxide ions, keeping the pH of the body carefully maintained in the aforementioned narrow range. Carbon dioxide is part of a prominent buffer system in the human body. It keeps the pH within the proper range. This buffer system involves carbonic acid and bicarbonate anion. If too much hydrogen ion enters the body, bicarbonate will combine with the hydrogen ion to create carbonic acid and limit the decrease in pH. Likewise, if too much hydroxide ions is introduced into the system, Carbonic acid will rapidly dissociate into bicarbonate and hydrogen ions. The hydrogen ions can combine with the hydroxide ions, limiting the increase in pH. While carbonic acid is an important product in this reaction, its presence is fleeting because the carbonic acid is released from the body as carbon dioxide gas each time we breathe. Without this buffer system, the pH in our bodies would fluctuate too much and we would fail to survive. This ends Chapter 2, Section 2.2. In our next video, we will be reading Section 2.3, Biological Molecules.